It's becoming increasingly likely that Joe Biden will not be on the ballot for the 2024 election, and Kamala Harris could be the one to replace him. Looking at the betting markets just a few hours ago, Kamala Harris actually surged up to a 57% chance at becoming the nominee. Now, her numbers have since come down, but this would be a disastrous scenario for the Democratic Party. Kamala Harris is the most unpopular vice president in modern history, and in this video, we're going to be taking a look at the 2024 electoral map if Kamala Harris does indeed replace Joe Biden as the Democratic nominee. So to fill in this map, we're going to begin with the solid Democratic and Republican states. These states will go to either candidate by margins of 15 percentage points or more. For Kamala Harris, we have Washington, her home state of California, Hawaii, Vermont, the 1st District of Maine, as well as Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Maryland, and the District of Columbia, giving her 109 electoral votes. Obviously, this is not a great start. If we look at the polling between Harris and Trump, Donald Trump actually leads over Harris by just 2 percentage points. This is smaller than the lead that Trump has over Biden, which is currently 2.4%. However, if you do look at the polling over the last few years between the vice president and the former president, virtually every single poll has shown Trump dominating. It's only in these 3 recent polls where that gap has actually started to shrink. And if we look at Kamala Harris's approval rating, it is a net negative 12.1. Now, she is actually more popular than Joe Biden, although this has not always been the case, especially throughout the majority of Biden's term. Kamala Harris was always significantly more unpopular, especially at the beginning. And so when looking at her performance as vice president, people are not really going to find too much. She honestly hasn't been in the spotlight very much since Biden took office, and there isn't really much that she can take credit for. And so now moving on to the solid states for Trump on our map, we're going to begin with Utah, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, North and South Dakota, the entirety of Nebraska with the exception of the 2nd District, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, and Alaska. These are all the states where Trump has won by solid margins in the past. However, we are going to include the 2nd District of Maine. He's polling very well there, and it is going to make the state of Maine as a whole a lot more competitive. We're also going to put in Iowa and Ohio as well, 2 states that Trump performed very well in 2020 against Kamala Harris. He can definitely win them by 12 percentage points, and so with the solid states for Trump filled in, he sits at 149 electoral votes. And now moving on to the likely states for Kamala Harris, we have Oregon and Colorado. These are the only 2 on the western half of the U.S. Oregon is just going to be right under 12%. Colorado, Biden won this state by 14 points. I'd expect the margin to be cut in half. We also have Illinois, New York, and New Jersey, and Delaware. I mean, New York, New Jersey Democrats are becoming more and more unpopular here with Bob Menendez and Kathy Hochul still in office. And so this puts Harris at right under 200 electoral votes. And really the big reason why Democrats want to get rid of Joe Biden is simply because he is not on track to win. If you look at how voters feel about his age, I mean, 74% think he is too old, and of course the debate only made that worse. And if you look at how polling has changed, on average Trump went from leading by 1% nationally to 3%, and Trump's margin actually increased by 3 points according to the 2 polls conducted by the New York Times. So really it's getting worse and worse for the incumbent president as people are seeing more and more that he may not be up to it simply because he is too old, and that's why Democrats are scrambling to replace him with Harris. But honestly, that might not be the best decision, as Kamala Harris really isn't too much more popular and honestly not much better of a campaigner either. Just look at how she performed in the 2020 Democratic primary. Before we continue, only 10% of you guys are actually subscribed, so make sure you take the time to subscribe right now for more content like this leading up to the election. And now to fill in the likely states for Trump, remember the likely states will vote for either candidate by margins between 5 and 12 percentage points. Looking at the likely states for Trump, we really only have 2 of them, and it's probably not too surprising what they are. They are, of course, Texas and Florida, the second and third largest states in the country by population, a combined 70 electoral votes. Democrats have California, Republicans now have Texas and Florida, two states that really aren't going to flip blue anytime soon. Florida used to be very competitive, of course, but in the last few years, it's taken a pretty sharp turn to the right. Donald Trump can probably win this state by upwards of 8 percentage points, while in Texas, Trump currently leads by 10 points in the polling average. He won the state by 9 points in 2016. We're probably going to see a return to that sort of margin with Kamala Harris as his opponent. And so with the solid and likely states filled in for both candidates, we still have a relatively tight race, but Trump has a clear edge here with 219 electoral votes. We now have 12 states remaining, and it is these 12 states that will get either candidate over that 270 electoral vote threshold. And just hypothetically, for Kamala Harris to win this election, he's going to have to win New Mexico, which she is already pretty likely to do. She's also going to have to hold on to Maine, New Hampshire, and Minnesota. She's going to have to win Michigan, Pennsylvania, Virginia as well, Wisconsin, and either the 2nd District of Nebraska or Nevada. So it's a pretty tall order, especially considering that Joe Biden is losing in the polling in virtually every single one of these states. And so we're going to begin with the lean states for Vice President Harris, starting off with New Mexico, 5 electoral votes. This state was almost lean Democratic in 2016. Hillary Clinton only won it by 8 points. And in 2020, Joe Biden did do slightly better, but with the Hispanic vote continuing to shift to the right, Kamala Harris is probably going to win this state by less than 5 points in this race. We also have the state of Maine. The at-large vote is going to be a lot more competitive than it's been in past cycles. Just look at the margin for Biden in 2020, 9.1%, although Clinton did make it pretty close in 2016. Maine is a flippable state, and I do expect it to get pretty competitive this cycle because polling right now does show that Trump can actually win the state of Maine as a whole, even against Joe Biden. And so those are the only 2 lean states for the vice president we have on this map. But of course, if she ran, there's a chance Biden could resign, although it is still more likely that she continues on as vice president and Biden serves out his full term. It'll be interesting to see what actually happens if Biden does indeed step down, which I think is a very likely scenario now. And he's even talking to his close aides about whether or not he should just stop his campaign because the age is really catching up to him. Now, moving on to the lean states for Trump, we have a significantly longer list of lean states, starting off with probably the most obvious one, and that is going to be North Carolina. Out of all the other lean states for Trump, Joe Biden won them. The only one he did not win was North Carolina, 16 electoral votes. The former president won it by 1.3% in 2020. In 2016, that margin was 3.7%. North Carolina has been shifting to the left as a whole. It currently does have a Democratic governor, but Democrats haven't won the state on the presidential level since 2008, and before that, you'd have to go all the way back to 1976. Georgia is going to be another lean red state. I mean, Joe Biden, when Donald Trump was president, was able to win Georgia by 0.25 percentage point. Now the Democrats have been in office for 4 years. We're obviously going to see voter fatigue from that. And combine that with the fact that Kamala Harris is not Joe Biden. She's not the incumbent president, and she is honestly less popular than the actual president, who is currently supposed to be the nominee. So replacing Biden with someone even worse, obviously they're not going to win a state like Georgia. In the Sun Belt, we also have Arizona, 11 electoral votes. This state was also very close in 2020. I mean, same logic in Georgia here. Kamala Harris really doesn't have too much appeal in Arizona. I mean, she does have, I guess, more of it in California, which is her home state. But if you go to other regions like the Northeast, the Midwest, I mean, unless she has someone really strong as her vice president in these regions, she's probably really not going to do too well. She definitely doesn't provide Biden with an edge electorally in any remotely important state. Now, Nevada, 6 electoral votes. This state hasn't voted red since 2004 and the re-election of George W. Bush, but today it really could flip in favor of Trump as he leads by nearly 5 points in the polling against Joe Biden, and against Kamala Harris, I'm going to place the silver state into the lean Republican category. And now moving up to the Midwest, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, the 3 blue wall states. They're called blue wall states because Democrats won them consistently from the 1980s, 1990s, all the way until 2012. As you can see here, they've been blue in every single election going back to the Bush era. And then in 2016, Donald Trump broke down that wall, won all 3 of these states by less than 1%. However, in 2020, Biden was able to narrowly win them back. In 2024, though, even if Kamala Harris doesn't become the nominee and Joe Biden stays on, Trump is still leading the polling in all 3 of these states, and he is the favored candidate in all 3 of them. However, with Harris on the ballot, it's only going to get worse for Democrats. Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania are all going to be lean Republican. We're now left with 3 more states that are going to fall into the tilt category. They are going to be won by margins less than 1%. They're going to be the most competitive states in the country. Virginia, we're going to begin with the Commonwealth of Virginia, 13 electoral votes. The state voted for Biden by 10 points in 2020. However, there is a weakness for Democrats. In 2016, Hillary Clinton, who ran with Tim Kaine as her running mate, and Kaine was a longtime senator from Virginia. In fact, he is still in the Senate, and he's running for re-election this year. Hillary Clinton only managed to win Virginia by 5 points. This state can definitely get competitive. We have a Republican governor in Virginia now, elected in 2021, and Donald Trump actually tied Joe Biden in Virginia in the 2 most recent polls. So on this map, I'm going to place it into the tilt Democratic category. Now, Minnesota and New Hampshire, on the other hand, these are states that Trump can win. In 2020, Joe Biden did do well. He won New Hampshire by 7 points. Same margin in Minnesota, but go back 4 years, Hillary Clinton only won Minnesota by less than 2 points, and New Hampshire by less than half of a single percentage point. So Democrats can definitely perform poorly in these states, and it could definitely be argued that Kamala Harris is an even worse of a Democratic nominee than Hillary Clinton was, and that is why both of these states will be placed into the tilt GOP column, with Minnesota voting red for the first time since 1972. We also have the 2nd District of Nebraska, which I will place into tilt Republican as well. If we look at the district in 2020, Joe Biden was able to win it by 6 points. However, 4 years prior, Trump won it by 2.2. I think it's going to go back to Trump this November. And so if Kamala Harris does indeed replace Joe Biden, which is becoming an increasingly likely scenario, just look at how unlikely this was just a few weeks ago. Kamala Harris went from a 5% chance at becoming the Democratic nominee, now up to 30-40% at some points. The market is constantly fluctuating. But if this happens, it's going to probably be even worse than having Joe Biden on the ballot. 327 electoral votes for Donald Trump to 211 for Kamala Harris is my current projection for this matchup. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure you like it down below. If you enjoyed it, comment down below who you think would win between Harris and Trump. Make sure you subscribe to my channel right now for more content like this leading up to the election, and I will see you guys in the next video.